For over a decade, Abdul Mun'im Abdullah has been relying on the profits from cereal farming to feed his family. The farmer in Gadarif in eastern Sudan says most of his farming materials are locally sourced. But they are harder to find now after a year of fighting between the Sudanese army and the paramilitary rapid support forces.
All
the materials that we need for planting, the pesticides, the seeds, the fertilizers, they used to cost a certain amount before the war, but their prices more than doubled after the war. Even the empty sacks that I used to put my harvest in now cost more than double what it used to be.
The fighting has also affected collecting the harvest, even in states where there is no active conflict. That's leading to less food being available in markets.
All the farmers in my area have crops that they couldn't harvest because the RSF robbed us of our equipment and fuel to operate the machinery. If you do manage to harvest something, they chase you and take away what you've collected.
The UN says cereal production alone has almost halved in the past year and warns of what may turn into the world's largest hunger crisis if it's not already.
Given that there is no Sudanese in the entire country that is untouched by the conflict, people simply will not have the means to be able to put the food on the table, and this is why we are desperately concerned.
Aid agencies say at least 18 million Sudanese are already going hungry, with 5 million of them just one step away from famine. Most live in areas where it's difficult to get food deliveries. What's complicating the situation even further is the ever-widening scope of the conflict. RSF paramilitary have recently managed to strike as far east as the state of Gadarif. Government leaders have the competing priorities of humanitarian intervention to prevent famine and military action to provide security. Mohamed Vall, Jazeera, Port Sudan.
And we are now joined by Michael Dunford, who you just saw in Mohamed Vall's report. He is the World Food Programme's Regional Director for East Africa and is joining us from Paris. Mr. Dunford, thank you very much for being with us on Al Jazeera. Sudan today is unfortunately not on top of most people's social feeds, not on top of the international agenda. I know you're attending a donors conference for Sudan in Paris. How are you going to convince donors not just to open their wallets more than they have, but also that they put more political pressure on the warring parties to stop this conflict?
I fully agree. It's essential that we get not only the funding, but also the political commitment to bring this conflict to an end. Until such time that the conflict ends, it will be impossible for the World Food Programme and others to be able to scale our operations to the extent that is required to meet the needs of the population. Sudan, in many ways, is already beyond the brink. What we need is a political investment to bring it back, and then for a lasting peace which would allow the humanitarian actors to scale and meet the needs of the population.
Yeah. We seem to be far from that at the moment. Right now, we have what the United Nations has described as the largest displacement crisis in the world, with millions of Sudanese having had to flee their homes. They need food, they need shelter, they need health care. How is the international community and how is WFP helping right now the people of Sudan?
So it's estimated that today there are over 18 million people who are acutely food insecure, and as indicated in your report, 5 million who are in emergency levels. The next step will be a catastrophe where we will see an increased risk of famine. So it's essential that all of the international community comes together, and with the support and buy-in from the various actors that would allow a humanitarian response to avert this catastrophe.
But what are you doing at your level, at WFP's level? What have you been doing? I mean, it's been going on for a year. How has it evolved? How has your response evolved in this past year?
So WFP has remained in Sudan since the beginning of the conflict, since the one-year event of last year. We have been feeding and making operations to reach people wherever we can. We're currently reaching, on average, 1.8 million people per month inside the country. We are also feeding refugees as they stream across into the Chad, into the Central African Republic, and into South Sudan. We are the backbone of the humanitarian infrastructure. We are providing logistics and communication support to all of the other stakeholders. But it's an extraordinarily difficult environment in which to be operating because of the insecurity, because of the ongoing conflicts, and because of the scale of the country and the needs of the population.
Yeah, talk to us more about those difficulties in reaching people, because we understand that aid is not getting to areas that are controlled by the RSF. Is that being prevented to happen from the government, or are there other factors at play here?
There's a whole range of factors that are contributing to this. This insecurity, the ongoing conflicts. You saw the images in Khartoum, a city that has been devastated. As a result, millions of people, we estimate over 8 million people have been displaced within the country. So trying to access them in their new environment is very complicated. Beyond that, it's just the logistics involved in moving food across a country that is as vast as Sudan. We recently did a convoy from Port Sudan to North Darfur. It took us over 3 weeks because at every point we needed to negotiate, not just with the two major parties, but with other militias to facilitate that transfer. Even once we arrived, it was then a question of, was the security sufficient for us to then do the distributions? So you put all of these factors in place. And of course, it's not just the food security, it's all sectors.
Right.
It's education, it's health that are impacted by this conflict.
Mr. Dunford, just briefly before we let you go, I mean, this crisis has also put a lot of pressure on neighbouring countries that are hosting people displaced from Sudan, Chad notably. What sort of assistance are these countries getting from the international community?
So the support to date has not been sufficient. We need to be able to scale in Chad, in South Sudan, and these are countries that already had significant humanitarian needs even before the crisis in Sudan. South Sudan today, 75% of the population needs humanitarian assistance. Similar numbers in Chad. So when you put all of these factors together, this is not a crisis solely for Sudan, although it's an absolute tragedy for the population. This has implications for the entire region. And unless we bring it to an end, the risk of further destabilization is very real.
Thank you so much for talking to us. Michael Dunford, World Food Programme Regional Director for East Africa, joining us there from Paris.
Thank you.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.